This video covers observations 18 through 23 in the Psychological Observations section of Schopenhauer's Studies in Pessimism. The first and longest of these observes and attempts to explain the fact that we individually in our psychology veer between caring little or nothing about the affairs of this world and being heavily invested in them and caring about them a great deal. I might call this the nothing ever happens versus we are so back dichotomy. Schopenhauer has an explanation for this in terms of his philosophy of the human person. Other observations deal with the psychology of the great, why it is that people of exceptional ability seem to obey a different set of rules from the common run of people, the value of having a friend to give you an outside perspective to achieve an objective estimation of your own character and person, and then a few very short observations about the psychology of death and how we tend to react to knowledge of our coming end. Here's the 18th observation. According as a man's mental energy is exerted or relaxed, will life appear to him either so short and petty and fleeting that nothing can possibly happen over which it is worth his while to spend emotion, that nothing really matters, whether it is pleasure or riches or even fame, and that in whatever way a man may have failed, he cannot have lost much. Or, on the other hand, life will seem so long, so important, so all in all, so momentous and so full of difficulty that we have to plunge into it with our whole soul if we are to obtain a share of its goods, make sure of its prizes, and carry out our plans. This latter is the immanent and common view of life. It is what Gracian means when he speaks of the serious way of looking at things, tomar muy de veras el vivir, to take life very seriously. The former is the transcendental view, which is well expressed in Ovid's Non est tanti. It is not worth so much trouble. Still better, however, by Plato's remark that nothing in human affairs is worth any great anxiety. And here Schopenhauer quotes some Greek that he attributes to Plato. I've put it up on the screen. I did a small bit of research, by which I mean I checked Reddit, and it seems, according to Redditors who've checked, that Schopenhauer has hallucinated this quote from Plato. These words in Greek do not seem to appear in a digital search of Plato's corpus. So my suspicion is that Schopenhauer, vaguely recollecting some idea from Plato, more or less accurately, constructed this quote in Greek on his own and ascribed it to Plato. Okay. I don't mean that as a direct accusation, and I'm happy to be corrected about it by anybody who cares to do the research. But it seems that this is a bit of a hand wave on Schopenhauer's part. As to the main part of this observation, which is not quite finished yet, here's Schopenhauer's observation about human beings and our psychology. We go back and forth between thinking nothing really matters. We are not able to really lose very much because none of the goods in this life are worth much at all, versus on the other hand, things are so important and so vital that I need to commit myself completely and utterly to grasping the good that is available in life. Knowing Schopenhauer as we do, we know which side he's going to come down on as being the objective and correct view of human life. But let's take a look now at his explanation for why this is the way it is with us. Schopenhauer goes on. This condition of mind is due to the intellect having got the upper hand in the domain of consciousness, where, freed from the mere service of the will, it looks upon the phenomena of life objectively, and so cannot fail to gain a clear insight into its vain and futile character. But in the other condition of mind, will predominates, and the intellect exists only to light it on its way to the attainment of its desires. A man is great or small according as he leans to the one or the other of these views of life. So here we have Schopenhauer's explanation, don't we? Why is it that sometimes we have this view, sometimes this the other? It is because we go back and forth between our intellect being superior to our will and our will being superior to our intellect. So to be a human being, to be a human consciousness or subjectivity, means to experience this constant struggle within you of will and intellect. And this reminds me, of course, and I think it ought to remind all of us, of Plato's account of the soul, with reason struggling to keep appetite in check. But here it is will. It's this sort of life force welling up within me that strives and struggles and consequently is miserable and makes me miserable because it can never be satisfied. For Schopenhauer, when I have these moments of realizing that nothing matters, that is when I have a clear-eyed intellectual view of the objective reality of my existence. Nothing really does matter. That's when I'm right. My intellect has been freed from serving my will, and I can, for a few moments, enjoy peace. Will is quieted then by this intellectual recognition. This is philosophical wisdom and its fruit, according to Schopenhauer. On the other hand, when I feel that life is full of good and I need to immerse myself in it and throw myself into it wholeheartedly, now that is will that is dominating over intellect. I see myself inaccurately, and I ignore, I forget the vanity and futility of striving, and I reduce my intellect, he says here too, only lighting the way of the will on the attainment of it to the attainment of its desires. I think here either Schopenhauer in the original German, or if not him, then certainly T. Bailey Saunders in his English translation, is deliberately echoing the expression of Hobbes in describing the role of the intellect in human life. Hobbes uses almost this exact same expression, that the role of reason is merely to show the way of the will to the thing desired. Schopenhauer is explicitly here rejecting that view, that Hobbesian view of the will, or I should say he's associating it with misery and an inaccurate, objectively inaccurate or false self-perception. But what is greatness or smallness in human personality? It is the inclination to one or the other, the intellectual or the willful experience of oneself. So, a great observation there, I think, with a lot of Schopenhauer's philosophy in it. We'll go on to the next one now. People of very brilliant ability think little of admitting their errors and weaknesses, or of letting others see them. They look upon them as something for which they have duly paid, and instead of fancying that these weaknesses are a disgrace to them, they consider that they are doing them an honor. This is especially the case when the errors are of the kind that hang together with their quality, conditiones sine quibus non, or, as George Sand said, les défauts de ses vertus. Contrarily, there are people of good character and irreproachable intellectual capacity who, far from admitting the few little weaknesses they have, conceal them with care and show themselves very sensitive to any suggestion of their existence. And this just because their whole merit consists in being free from error and infirmity. If these people are found to have done anything wrong, their reputation immediately suffers. I think this is an interesting observation because it puts us onto an explanation for the different set of rules that seem to apply to the great. Why is it that this politician or this celebrity is so shameless in doing, in fact, admitting to doing things that would cause any of us to cringe and to seek refuge? Why do the shameful things that we keep secret become a source of indifference or even pride for them? And Schopenhauer's explanation here is that for people of very high ability, people of superior excellence, their faults are simply part of themselves. They become almost adornments of their greatness, things for which they have paid, things which do them honor. They take pride in their faults. We might say this is the privilege of excellence, is the ability to, unlike the common run of people like you and me, to take to take pride in your faults, to show them without shame. And I think that, of course, is the case, he says here as well, especially that it's the case if these faults are of a piece with, are necessary conditions for the element that causes your greatness. So if I'm admiring a particular great person, I would say, well, his greatness goes along with his vices. The vices are just part of the whole package. And my respect for his excellence leads me to minimize or merely accept his vices. Whereas this other kind of person, right, people of good character and intellectual capacity, but they're deeply ashamed of their errors and faults because their merit comes not from this sort of excellence that they have, but from being thought to be flawless. So here's the interesting irony of, I think, is that it is the shame and the desire to be perfect, to appear to be perfect, is precisely the preoccupation of the middle run of people, the high group in the bell curve, the strivers. The truly excellent don't care about any of that at all. They're more than willing to admit that they're flawed. So here's this sort of ironical inversion that the more superior you are, the less need you have to be or to appear perfect, to the point where you can even sort of take a kind of shameless pride in your vices. They don't become vices. We might say the very idea of shameful vice is a kind of a bourgeois phenomenon. It's a middle class thing to need to be ashamed of your errors and crimes. That as a person ascends to this higher and higher level of excellence, the very quality of their excellence excuses all of their faults. And again, most especially when those faults are actually connected with the source or the activity that is their greatness. Next observation. With people of only moderate ability, modesty is mere honesty. But with those who possess great talent, it is hypocrisy. Hence, it is just as becoming in the latter to make no secret of the respect they bear themselves, and no disguise of the fact that they are conscious of unusual power, as it is in the former to be modest. Valerius Maximus gives some very neat examples of this in his chapter on self-confidence, De Fiducia Sui. This is the second observation about the psychology of the great, and it is the kind of flip version of the former. Just as the great need feel no shame for their errors, they need feel no modesty about their greatness and about boasting about it, about sharing with it, and sharing with you the very high opinion they have of themselves. It is just fine for Caesar to glorify Caesar just as other people glorify Caesar, to take a non-contemporary example for us. So to make no secret of one's self-respect and one's excellence is, in fact, the privilege, and Schopenhauer might say rightly so, of the people of excellent ability. Next. Not to go to the theater is like making one's toilette without a mirror. But it is still worse to take a decision without consulting a friend. For a man may have the most excellent judgment in all other matters, and yet go wrong in those which concern himself. Because here the will comes in and deranges the intellect at once. Therefore, let a man take counsel of a friend. A doctor can cure everyone but himself. If he falls ill, he sends for a colleague. An observation here about the value of friendship. Our friends can see things in us that we don't see, in part because, great expression here, the will comes in whenever I'm trying to judge myself and deranges my intellect. It simply scrambles it so I can't see myself as I truly am. I need my friends just as a doctor needs a fellow physician to heal him when he's ill. The last two observations I'll take together since they both deal with death. In all that we do, we wish, more or less, to come to the end. We are impatient to finish and glad to be done. But in the last scene of all, the general end, is something that, as a rule, we wish as far off as may be. Every parting gives a foretaste of death, every coming together again a foretaste of the resurrection. This is why even people who were indifferent to each other rejoice so much if they come together again after 20 or 30 years' separation. The first of these deals with the fact that we often would like to come to the end, especially of an unpleasant process, but it's not the case that we are rushing towards our death. No one wants to die so as to be from free from the burdens of life. We would like to be done with it, but we're not going to hasten it. We're not going to seek out its end. As a general rule, we'd like to have it as far off as may be. Okay? And this, the flip side of this, it's curious to see a thinker like Schopenhauer speaking of the resurrection as a kind of cultural touchstone. Every parting gives a foretaste of death. I'm torn away from my friend by our departure. But every meeting again, a foretaste of resurrection, a source of hope. And so if I meet someone I knew in high school 3 decades ago, I am far happier than the meeting again of somebody that I really didn't care much about back then and have not had any occasion to think about in the intervening years would justify. But instead of, oh, hey, fantastic, it's great to see you again. Why is this? It is because there's a little foretaste of something that we might hope for in the aftermath of our death, this foretaste of the resurrection. So even indifference, after meeting somebody to whom we were indifferent after decades of separation, is a pleasant experience. Schopenhauer here, I think, is speaking to a sort of common psychological phenomenon. I don't think that he is suggesting anything about Christian revelation being true. He's simply saying this is the sort of pattern that we observe in ourselves, and here is an explanation for it. Just as parting is like death, coming back together again, even with somebody we didn't think that much of, is like something going like a resurrection beyond death. So those are the 18th through 23rd observations from psychological observations. The 24th is quite long, longer than all of these combined, and it deals with the different degrees of reality that Schopenhauer ascribes to different types of consciousness or selfhood. I think you'll find it very interesting, and we'll deal with that in the next video. Thanks for watching today. Goodbye.